You're listening to the Procuretech Podcast, your weekly show for all that's cooking in the digital procurement space. Yes, we've got the hottest startups, thought leadership, and conversation from visionary industry experts, and definitely no stiff corporate content. I'm your host, James Meads, Procurement Pro, Digital Nomad, and Procuretech fanboy. And now, here's this week's show. Yes, and a very warm welcome to a brand new series of the Procuretech Podcast, where twice a week we're bringing you everything that is fun, innovative, and exciting in the digital procurement space. And because this is the very first episode in this series, let me just give you a quick rundown of how this is going to work. So in the past series, we would typically speak to startup founders, CEOs, CMOs of procurement tech companies, whereas in this series, we're switching it a little bit and we're going to be talking to industry leaders and influencers in this space to get their thoughts and opinions and projections on everything that they see happening or likely to happen all around digital transformation of procurement. And for this very first episode, I'm bringing on a guest to the show who actually is from the finance community. And we're going to dig into why procurement and finance often are sparring partners, and unnecessarily so. I think we will both agree. We were both on a panel recently at a P2P transformation conference in London, where really the talk was about how procurement and finance really are natural allies, but it doesn't always transpose to be the case in the business environment that we find ourselves in. So, Chris Argent from CFO, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I didn't realize we were the first episode, so I better make it good so everyone listens to the second.
Yeah, it better be a good one, otherwise no one will listen to the next. So your background obviously is in the finance space, and you've pivoted from a corporate career into running your own online community of finance professionals. So just let's start off, just give a quick background just to set the scene of, how you got into this space and who your community comprises of, just so as we can set the scene for the conversation, and then we'll dig into to the meat on the bone all around, how you're seeing technology and procurement impact the finance space.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the warm welcome, because as you say, sometimes procurement and finance can be a little bit at odds, but we'll dig into that. My journey started out as a finance professional. I was a sort of FD, financial controller, finance director within small organizations, medium-sized organizations. And there was a key moment in that career where I stumbled across a fraud, and the fraud was perpetrated basically because of poor systems and poor technology. So I thought, I'm part of the problem. I need to switch. I couldn't change mindsets around me at the time. This was a good 15, 20 years ago. So I decided to go into the finance transformation arena. I was lucky enough to work with some really big players, spending a lot of money in that area at the time. Sort of John Lewis, Amazon, Vodafone. And it opened my eyes to shared services and obviously procurement technology as well, which started to come into that arena. But I ended up focusing purely on finance, and in the latter years, BI and analytics and advanced analytics, all that good stuff. And I realized that sort of when I was journeying through the transformation programs that I ran, that there were a lot of people around me who did not get it, who did not understand the power of this technology. They didn't see the future right on the horizon there, which was going to mean more tech-savvy people needed, more data-savvy people needed. We didn't know about ESG and the like, supply chains, back then. But obviously that's, driven a whole new wave of analytics and data requirements within our industry. And the result of a lot of people asking me, Chris, we need to learn more about this, was GenerationCFO. So I started up a LinkedIn group, and here we are some sort of 19 years later, I think it is, where we have a reach of about 100,000 people, all from an accounting and finance point of view. And we get together regularly to talk about, these transformation problems and the future of our teams.
Well, so that's a pretty big community then. Are they all based in the UK, or do you also have, international branches as well?
So we're predominantly UK focused, but obviously, online we're all over the place. We've probably got a third of our audience in the US and, 2/3 to a half in Europe, and then the rest in Asia. We have physical meetups in the UK only, but we are getting asked all the time to go around the world. I just need to check in with my family whether that's okay at the moment.
So you've been going a lot longer than I have, obviously, with this podcast and with procurementsoftware.site and, what we're building there. That's a long time to be in this space in terms of the changes that you've no doubt seen in how technology has impacted finance transformation. Yep. So maybe talk to me a little bit about, and this is, obviously I'm more focused on the procurement tech, but there is crossover in terms of fintech and AP automation as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
What have you seen as the main trends then over this time, or how has the conversation changed over that period?
Yeah, that's a big question, but I'll try and break it down. I think, first of all, there was this acknowledgement that, we could use technology for better, whether it was procurement transformation or finance transformation. And just to let you know, I was on a P2P procure-to-pay transformation within John Lewis, but I was representing a finance community there, even because it was owned by finance. That obviously didn't go into source to pay where procurement would have come in, but I'm very much exposed to your world. But I think back then there was an acknowledgement that we could do better. And, it sprung the shared service environment, and that was very much driven by these sort of cost per seat, labor arbitrage type conversations. We can save 20% if we move everything to India. But actually, I think that's not the case anymore. I think there's sort of negligible savings in that area. What's really happened now is that we need to, understand technology, optimize what we currently do for almost like this greater good for the business. So finance now, and I'm sure procurement, are thinking more about business partnering and solving business problems. And it's not just sort of a siloed approach. And also with things coming down the track like ESG, we need to start asking who's responsible for that. And, the CFO feels responsible for managing a lot of the business risk. So they're being asked to look at it, but they're also being asked to maybe change some of their approaches towards supply chain and ESG and environmental social reporting, because, they are the reporters of business information at the end of the day. So there's a lot of crossover happening. And I also think from a technology point of view today, particularly, when we try to accelerate processes, we're trying to accelerate it end to end. So we can't ignore procurement, and procurement can't ignore finance, because, you're buying the stuff and we're paying for it.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll come on to ESG a little bit later. I did want to dive into that as part of the wider trends of, how can technology be the driver in elevating procurement as a profession. And I think ESG, or supply chain transparency in general, does come into that. But I want to just go back to the point that you mentioned about silos. Because one of the frustrations that I myself, and I know that pretty much 99.8% of every other procurement professional out there would have had the same issue, is that we often struggle to get finance to recognize the wider value that we as a function deliver to the business. And, I understand that, we as procurement have to dance to finance's tune in terms of how you measure the numbers, but there will always be that invisible work that procurement does, beneath, the invisible part of the iceberg in terms of added value that we drive to the business that isn't necessarily obviously visible to the P&L. Do you think technology can play a part in that, in terms of, instead of procurement historically maybe blowing their own trumpet about all of the cost avoidance that they've delivered and none of the business recognizing it? Do you think technology is having more of a collaboration platform between internal stakeholder, supplier and procurement together through a collaboration platform and a more digitized, centralized project management mechanism can can help to shine a light more on that type of work that takes place?
Yeah, I do. You won't be surprised to hear. That's why I'm here. But I do. I think there are three parts to this, right? So yes, technology is one. Technology is going to create the visibility, the transparency in that cost saving exercise, or the tasks that you're performing, or the contract management that you've done, or the consolidation that you're doing, which is probably fairly opaque. And I'm not standing up for finance people here. It's just that it's not clear to other people of the work and the effort and the benefit to the business, right? So I think technology can help speed up and make more visible that brilliant work that you're doing. I do think there are two other elements to this, though, that is equally as important. One, the second one is people. So people in general, right? People need to be collaborating. Finance and procurement need to be collaborating. And if you don't have a finance business partner to talk to, then you need one. And I think you need to go and ask your CFO or your finance director for that person, because it's the finance business partner's responsibility to really represent you from a finance point of view and to be your voice within the finance team. It's, you've got a job to be getting on with. And obviously this only happens in certain size companies, but the role of the business partner could be, part of someone's job. It doesn't have to be sort of one individual just saying how amazing you guys are or helping you make business decisions or improve your business. But that kind of people collaboration, business partnering approach is critical, I think, to solve the problem. And the third thing that helps, which I'm not sure when it's going to happen again, is a pandemic. Because boy, didn't that flush out a lot of
Probably
issues.
Sooner than you think.
Yeah, don't. I want my holiday. Yeah, it changed the mindset overnight of how we view our processes, how we view our roles within the business, what's really important. And I'm sure procurement felt this as much as finance during the pandemic. All of a sudden, we got a lot of airtime within the business. It was no longer about, sales and revenue and growth. It was about survival. And, we really came in to save some of our businesses. So I think, maybe not a pandemic, but the third thing is just this sort of mindset, which I think can help.
Yeah. And going back to what you said a little bit earlier around ESG, I want to bring that back in now. And some of the other points that you just touched on around talent and around having that business partner and the people factor as well. To what extent do you think technology will be the driver behind, pushing that agenda forward? Is part of the problem essentially just because so much of that dialogue and conversation is siloed in people's inboxes that the wider business doesn't get wind of what's going on, perhaps?
I think so. I want to say it's the number one thing, right? Because I think it's that important. I want to say technology is going to change the way we do business. It's going to change the way how we maintain high performance within our teams. I want to say that, yeah. But I've worked within these programs and I've worked within change programs, and I have to now also say, the people element is as important. But the risk with me sort of saying that is that people then go, oh, well, the technology part isn't as important, but it really is. So I do think that they're equally important, but the learning journey and the time to value, I suppose, on some of this is on the technology side, right? The people are already in place. The people can actually be brought up to speed quite quickly. It's the technology piece, I think, that's really going to, elevate the profession. And you're saying from a procurement point of view, I'm having exactly the same conversation on the accounting and finance side, where Generation Z and even, Generation A, whatever the next one is, they don't think of technology in the way we do. It's just there. And it works. It's
what they grew up with, isn't it? Especially Generation Z. They're the first ones that went through their teenage years using Facebook and Instagram and whatever else is out there, right?
Exactly.
Hey, so just a quick interlude to let you know about procurementsoftware.site. This is a new website that I recently launched to give you, the listener, a free-to-access, intuitive guide to digital procurement technology. You can filter on a multitude of different criteria and pick out a short list of procurement software solutions that are relevant to your business and your needs in less time than it takes to boil an egg. No corporate subscriptions, no complex jargon, and definitely no pay-to-play model. We are a completely transparent, open book, and we really want to get your feedback on what we can really do to make this user experience better and constantly improve so as we're providing value to you. Check out procurementsoftware.site. And now let's get right back to this week's podcast. When you talk about people, do you think that it's a problem in terms of the missing capabilities, resistance to change, or just poor communication from the project team when it comes to rollout of these platforms? Because the obvious stinker is if you choose a really clunky piece of software that both suppliers and stakeholders hate using, and that does happen. And there's a big famous name that, I think we can all think of that is notoriously not very user-friendly, but you can still get it to be successfully adopted if you have the right change management process, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think like all of the above, need to be addressed, right? I don't think there's any one point of failure on these programs. I think it'd be silly to say so. Even if the tool is bad, if there's great gains to be had, then you'll kind of live with it for a while if you believe in the sort of greater good. I think that the critical sort of success factors are, yes, select the right tool, but also involve people before you get anywhere near that decision so that they're bought into it. And then the effort, I think, on implementation is not readiness or training at the end of a project. It's 50-50. If all you're doing is kicking something off and creating a bit of a town hall buzz, and then 3 months later, 6 months later, coming back and say, right, we've arrived, then you've already, lost the momentum. I think you need to be creating a community of people who are coming together around these transformations, these changes, and making tiny change, incremental change. One of the things that I firmly believe in, having done this a very long time, is the sort of Kaizen approaches and the tiny changes and continuous improvement kind of methodology. That I know that consultants don't work in that way, but I think people on the ground within companies who are trying to adopt this technology need to be kind of improving every day. And they become their own internal consultants or their internal entrepreneurs, as they call them, rather than entrepreneurs. So I think it's all the above is relevant. You've mentioned quite a few things that are going to be the success or the failure of a project.
And I love that term entrepreneur because, I rant often that we don't have enough visionaries in procurement and we have too many technocrats. And I do think that is hamstring in our profession. I wanted to go back to the community that you run, and especially when you said about your audience being, predominantly UK and Western Europe based, but you've also got a sizable portion in the US or in North America as well. Do you see much difference geographically in terms of maturity of digitization, or is it more based on company size or industry sector? Are there any specific patterns that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think there is a regional difference for sure. I think, I've almost started in the wrong place. The UK is very traditional, steeped in professional history. Very much, there are sort of systems that we're very happy to lean on. And, procurement's probably quite a new profession compared to accounting, right? That's been going 200 odd years.
Yeah.
So,
no, absolutely.
So we've got 200 years of history that we're trying to change, 200 years of a mindset that we're trying to change. So in the UK, it's a conservative way of approaching these things. Also, and from an accounting point of view, it's a fairly controlled and ordered way of doing your work. So that's a perfect storm when it comes to making change really hard.
In comparison to where? To continental Europe or to the US, North America? Or?
In comparison to the US, this is the biggest, sort of spectrum, because I think Europe's somewhere in between. It's more of a sort of committee-based, but they are quicker to move, I see.
Right.
But the US is very much like, let's do this. Let's make a change. Let's, shorter decision cycles on buying some of this technology. There are a lot of people who are still trying to work it out. And there are a lot of accounting controllers who are very happy in their sort of, their roles. But there's equally, I think, a real movement around people who are, loving the technology and, understanding that there is a bigger opportunity there. And maybe it's just because of the number of people in the US who aren't necessarily, qualified in those senior positions. So there's more of a voice, and they're democratizing a lot of the conversation. They're just saying, like, here it is, let's get on with it. They're using social media and channels. They want to be seen to get their message out there. There's a lot less of that going on in the EU and very much the UK. And in a traditional profession like accountancy, the thought of sort of having a social media savvy CFO in the US, they're called rock star CFOs, right? They're called out as these amazing people. In the UK, the board might want to sack them, for misconduct.
Well, especially if they're a rock star, you wouldn't want them coming into work on coke and after 2 bottles of whiskey, would you?
Well, yeah. Well, if Elon Musk can do it, why not?
Ooh.
Or that was on a podcast, actually, smoking weed on a podcast.
It was actually, it was from Joe Rogan.
I've only got cans of Coke on this.
It's interesting what you're saying about that, though, because I've spoken to and I know personally quite a lot of founders from the German-speaking countries that have procurement tech startups, and they're all very keen to attack the US market, and to a lesser extent the UK, because they say German business culture is super conservative in a lot of ways as well. So it's interesting that you're saying the same about the UK. Is certainly from an accounting perspective, that's a great insight. So final question, Chris, if anyone would like to learn more about what you're up to with Generation CFO, what's the best place that they can get hold of you, and who is obviously finance professionals, but who is your target audience there? Yeah,
so I'm very much a LinkedIn junkie. I kind of lean on that, do a little bit of YouTube, but nothing much. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Generation CFO is the website if you're interested in that. We do look at sort of P2P and S2P, and we do have this conversation the other way around. And we have had procurement people come to our events and sort of say, it's really interesting hearing the other side of the coin and being in the minority. So rather than hearing, that echo chamber and just navel gazing, you are actually sort of trying to understand other people's point of views properly. So I think that's where you'll find us. And I personally, away from Gen CFO, talk a lot about continuous improvement and, the sort of agile mindset, as well as via Gen CFO, looking at analytics and automation and all that sort of good stuff.
I love that. Get out of your echo chamber is the best advice you can have. I learned so much by going to P2P transformation where we met in June. Just being able to network with the finance community and learn a little bit more about their challenges. Yeah, definitely recommend it to anyone out there. Chris, thank you very much. That's been so insightful in terms of understanding where the other side of the table is sometimes coming from, and some of their challenges and quirks. So thank you very much for joining me, and good luck with your already very large and mature community. And best wishes. Stay in touch.
Thanks, James. It's a pleasure.
Okay, that was Chris from Generation CFO. Links to all of his details are in the show notes. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back again on Thursday, where we'll be bringing you our second in the series. Until then, take care. Bye for now, wherever you are, and see you soon.